Good morning. It's 9:02. Sorry for being late. I'm Tom Clayboy, filling in for Jim Snowden. He's out of town. Um, do we have a quorum, Dallas? Okay. I guess next order of business is introduction of participants. So we'll start with Mike Conger.
Mike Conger, TPO staff.
Craig Lipke, TPO staff as well.
Don Walker for Blount County, Chico Messer.
Laura Smith, East Tennessee Development District.
Dallas DeArmond, Knoxville, Knox County Planning Staff.
Brian Boone, City of Maryville Engineering and Public Works.
Jack Walls, Loudoun County, City of Loudoun.
Daryl Smith, Town of Farragut.
Dakota Gentry, City of Alcoa.
Doug Burton, TPO Coordinator.
Once again, I'm Tom Clayboy, City of Knoxville.
Amy Brooks, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Blake Sarton, Metro Knoxville Airport Authority.
Catherine Baldwin, Anderson County.
Larry Gann, City of Clinton.
Roger Flynn, City of Oak Ridge.
Troy Ebert, TDOT.
Nancy Welch, I'm sitting in for Karen Estes, Knox County CAC.
Tina Whitaker, Lakeway MPO.
All right, our next order of business.
Pat Downs with Knoxville Area Transit.
Thank you, Pat. We've got the introduction of Zoom participants.
We have Anne Marie Anway and Catherine McClanahan are on Zoom.
And then do we have any amendments to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I guess next item is minutes. We were off in June, so these are, we've got the May 13th, 2025 minutes in our packet. Any questions or comments about those? All right, seeing none, to have a motion to approve those?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Number 3 on their agenda is the FY 2026-2027 Transportation Planning Work Program, and we have Doug's going to present on that.
Yep, thank you. Y'all have already seen this 2 or 3 times, but we're here to the point where we need to move towards adoption of our next work program. Go ahead to the next slide. Just a few things. This is a 2-year work program, and you'll see it sometimes referred to as a Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, or the Transportation Planning Work Program. Those are both the same thing. And this work program works on the federal fiscal year. So federal fiscal year 26 starts October 1 of 25, runs through September 30th of 26, and then our second year will be for fiscal year 27, which is October 1 of 26 through September 30th of 27. We get a expectation memo from FHWA, FTA, and TDOT. It kind of outlines how we need to set up the work program. We already submitted a draft to TDOT and FHWA for their review, and we had very minor comments, just a few minor changes, a couple typos, and we had one math problem in one of our tables, and those have all been corrected. And TDOT and FHWA need this adopted by August 29th, but we're hoping we can get this done this month. We're hoping to take August off. We have a statewide MPO TDOT conference the week of our August tech, so it would be really great if we can get this knocked out this month. That's our goal. I didn't go into all the details. We presented this at another meeting, but we do have to shape our work program around the federal 10 planning factors. I have those if we want to go back over them, but I kind of went through each of them and just pulled out what I thought was the key word of those of the factors, and you can kind of see they revolve around economic vitality, global competitiveness, safety and security, accessibility and mobility, the environment, energy conservation, integration and connectivity, efficient, preservation, resiliency, reliability, travel, and tourism. Those are a lot of keywords that for you have been working with us for a long time. Those have been kind of the same for many years, but our work program is supposed to try to address these factors. TDOT also gives us a couple different factors. They want us to be sure to help you guys be able to apply for their planning grants, and also one of their key factors is just to continue to work all together to improve regional planning coordination. A couple of things that we have to kind of be aware as we put this work program together. We're still getting, new priorities from the new administration. And then the Transportation Act, the framework, which kind of puts all of our funding and planning efforts together, it expires in the middle of this work program. So there should be a new Transportation Act. Occasionally, they will extend those, but I'm thinking that the Republican, Congress will try to get this passed before the midterm elections. But there could be new priorities that come out of that we would have to address midterm and maybe modify our work program slightly. I'm not going to go over all this, but this just shows you in the expectation memo, this is how they want us to frame up the work program. All the MPOs across the state have the same framework. We're all submitting our work programs at the same time, and that just makes it easier for both TDOT and FHWA and FTA to approve. So I'm going to work you through those key areas just to tell you a little bit. If you actually look at the work program, there's well over 100 tasks. I'm not going to go through all of those. I kind of just picked the greatest hits so you'll know what we're doing in those key areas. The administration, that's kind of our day-to-day business. It's managing our work program. It's holding these meetings. It's going to conferences. One thing we're always charged with is to have a proactive public engagement process. We have an outreach plan, and we'll be updating that as part of our effort in the first year of our work program. You're charged to update that periodically, and kind of the best practice is to do that after every mobility plan. So we'll be working on that. We also are responsible to educate and get information out to the public, maintain our website, and then, as I mentioned, we have to prepare for the next Transportation Act. We do all kinds of data collection. We have a traffic count program that utilizes both TDOT counts, and we do some of our own. You can look back 20, 30 years of the history of traffic counts all across the MPO area. We get a lot of calls, and a lot of people utilize that database. We're always checking on the census. As you know, we maintain the crash and safety data. We're also developing a dashboard that that shows our performance measures. This was something that came out of our certification. It was a recommendation. We were waiting to get through the mobility plan because we knew that effort we were going to collect a lot of data. So we're working on that right now, and that'll be a key part of our first year in the work program is to get that dashboard up and running. We also do technical reports through our planning agency, and then a lot of modeling with our air quality. And this data collection, as you know, a lot of you are participating in the pavement conditions work that Craig oversees. Short-range planning typically focuses around the TIP. As this will be an agenda item, Craig is working on our new fiscal year 26-29 TIP. It'll technically be in this work program. We're hoping to get it approved in October, so it'll be just right inside the beginning. Then we always have to maintain the TIP. Those are the modifications and administrations we do from month to month. We have to do an annual listing of obligated projects. We monitor the fund balance. We work with you and TDOT to help facilitate timely project delivery, and we're implementing a new E-TIP. Craig is on a statewide committee with TDOT. They're implementing this for all the MPOs. So he is working on shepherding in that new process, which is taking a lot of time, but it should, in the long run, help us be a lot more efficient about getting the TIP modifications and administrations done. Long-range planning is really focusing on our mobility plan. Even though we just wrapped up the 2050 plan, and the second part of this work program in the second year, we'll have to begin the process to update the mobility plan 2055. It takes a couple of years to do that. And every time we say we're going to start sooner because we end up rushing at the last end, but it seems like you can't start soon enough. But we will be in the second part starting the mobility plan. And when we do the mobility plan, 4 years in transportation terms is not a lot doesn't change. So sometimes we look at these as, are we doing a mobility plan light, which means we're just kind of reaffirming what we did. And then sometimes we do a very deep dive into our mobility plan. And that's kind of, I think our 2055 is going to be a way more deep dive. We need to update our congestion management process and our ITS architecture plan. And those are some things we will probably start early on in the second year of this work program to get prepared for the mobility plan. And then Mike's going to talk a little bit about this today. We're scoping out the update to our travel demand model, but the bulk of that work will be in the first year of the work program. Multimodal, it's a little bit of a different animal in this because if any of our other agencies around the table have federal funds that they use for planning or administration, they have to be in our work program. So some of these items also deal with CAT and CAC. And the TPO. We always have to update our transit asset management plans, our public transit safety plans. All the agencies have their own Title VI plan they have to update. And we have our annual program of projects. CAT has a few specific projects in here. They're going to update their lift service review. That's their ADA service. They're going to do a bus shelter location mapping project, and they're also doing a major bus survey. They have to do that. That's required by the federal government to periodically do a bus survey that fits in with their Title VI. So that will be undertaking that. We, working with CAC, are going to update our Human Service Transportation Coordination Plan. And then you'll see in there 5310. I wanted to bring that up because, as you know, at our last meeting, we passed a resolution that the TPO is going to be shifting that responsibility to CAC. But we'll be, over the next year, fading out. We still have some things we're obligated to do under the grants we have. So we'll be fading out our work as CAC begins to build up. So in there, you'll see we're both mentioned. And that's, if you're like, hey, I thought the TPO was shifting that to CAC, that's why we're both mentioning. We're still working through that process. We participate in plans for sidewalks, bike facilities and greenways. And then we have some funding for complete street strategies. FHW and FTA can allow us to use our planning funding at 100%, and we put aside about $200,000. So if any of you have any ideas for projects that can deal with complete street strategies, we can look at funding that at 100%.
Doug, I got a question.
Sure.
Can you go back to the slide? The 5310 funds.
Right.
So CAC, and I was at our last meeting, CAC is going to be administering those funds. Are those funds for the entire planning area, or are they just for the Knoxville area?
No, those come here based on our urban area. So we fund, like Loudoun County Senior Center has received funding for a van, Emory Valley Center out in Oak Ridge.
Yeah, so my question becomes, why would ETHRA not be the ones administering that, since they are more regional?
Yeah, I mean, that could have been a possibility, but when we had discussions, it is a pretty big burden. I think Mike did not want to take that on. There's a lot of work that has to be done. But CAC, even though they're Knox County, they have a lot of grants that they do regionally. They have some grants that are for 16 counties. I know they've done grants, so I think it'll be a good.
Okay, thanks.
Good thing. All right, kind of here towards the last section. We have the last section of special studies and grant opportunities, and this is where we put a lot of the studies that we're going to hire consultants. A lot of these you have submitted and asked for funding. If you did not put in a specific project, at the very top, we have about $500,000 we put in a placeholder for transportation planning studies. So at any time over the next 2 years, if you have a planning study that you need, you can always come forward and ask for our assistance in funding that. But a few of you did put in for some studies. We have the planning study for Kingston Pike Campbell Station, the Municipal Center Drive connection for Farragut, they requested that, the Montvale Road planning study in Maryville, the Tazewell Pike corridor study for the city of Knoxville, an alleyway survey and study for the city of Knoxville. We'll continue to work with Knox County on the Unified Development Ordinance and some of their small area plans. We're going to assist the city of Knoxville with their upcoming comp plans, looking at the land use, transportation, and mobility connections. And then we don't have a specific project, but one area that our group feels like we've been a little bit light in is our freight planning efforts. Over the years, we've tried to do this, and because a lot of this data is private, we have a hard time getting it, but it is a requirement that we look at how freight planning impacts our transportation system. So we've got in here, we're still working as a staff to figure out what to do. Is it just data collection? Do we do a technical report? Or maybe possibility of study, but that's something we're looking at. So that kind of wraps up the work program. Like I said, I wanted to remind you it's 2 years. One thing that's kind of unique about this is typically every time we have some big project, it's either the mobility plan we're working on or the TIP, but we should have an 18-month window here where we don't have any of those large things going on. So I think there's a chance for us to do some fun and exciting things. And so we will look forward to working with you guys. I don't have the funding table, but if you look at the back, it's over $8 million. And like I said, that's a two-year work program. And that's not all planning funds. It can, CAT funds are in there, CAC funds are in there, the pavement management funds are in there. We have some CMAQ funds in there. But it's a pretty significant work program, and we're really excited about it. And if I'll take any questions, but if we don't have any, we need a motion to recommend to the executive board approval of the work program.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes.
Thank you.
We have item number 4. It's the FY 2026-2029 Transportation Improvement Program Development Update. Craig?
Thank you, Tom. Just wanted to provide a quick update on where we are on the development of the TIP. We've been working on this since the beginning of the year. You've seen various iterations of this. We talked about programming policy changes, and we've looked at funding tables various times. We're kind of getting down to just wrapping up the draft of it is right now, but we don't quite have the draft ready to release yet. That eTIP platform, we're waiting on being able to generate the TIP pages out of that and run up the fiscal tables out of that platform, and that's still getting navigated. So just a real quick update. If you look at a snapshot of the investments that are in the TIP, we're looking at just under $540 million. Individually listed projects, 34 this time, which are pretty heavily weighted towards local projects, TDOT projects through the 10-year plan. As you may recall, a few months ago, we removed a number of projects that were not advancing. So individually listed TDOT projects, there are only 4. The breakdown, if you get over to the local projects, we've got 25 roadway projects, 5 transit projects. One thing that's changing a little bit with this iteration is the bike and pedestrian projects. We're already in a grouping. The ITS and a lot of our CMAQ and transit signal projects are going to go into a grouping rather than being individually listed as well. They will still be there though. So if we go over on that grouping side, we're adding, we have that grouping with travel, congestion and clean air, and all of those ITS, CMAQ type projects are going to be folded into there. There are 8 projects within that grouping, 18 in the bike and pedestrian grouping, a couple of planning and studies. That's the pavement management project, as well as one study for the city of Knoxville, I believe. And then preservation, operations, and safety grouping is there. That also is kind of a placeholder at this point, nothing individually listed, but some funding in there. And if we have something that comes along, we can modify projects into that. And then the standard TDOT typical groupings that they have, their safety as well as their NHS grouping and another regional maintenance grouping for STP funded projects. Move on to the next title. The other one that we've seen, multiple versions of kind of this table. This is a real quick snapshot and kind of talking about where we are, revenue through those programs from LSTBG, the TAP program, and carbon reduction. That first column, you'll see that total revenue, $142.8 million for the region, balanced across the expenditures of $101 million, with $41 million then unprogrammed or unsubscribed there. You will see the program reserve, that 10% program reserves numbers down below. I will point out that this does leave us in a fairly flexible position, in that we're hopeful that perhaps as we move through this cycle, we may be able to have kind of a midpoint program call. We would also anticipate, in consultation with TDOT, the CMAQ program, PM 2.5, may be another opportunity not listed here because it's not technically TPO allocated funds, but that's something that we're also may anticipate that we'll be able to do. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And then a real quick look at the schedule. Targeting a draft TIP submission to TDOT by next week. Knock on wood. That is the plan. We're still on schedule with some ability to wiggle a little bit and still get to an October adoption. If that draft TIP submission doesn't quite get there by July 15th, we may be able to entertain moving that to November if need be, but we're looking at moving this forward with a typical October adoption, which would put us in place to have those funding available after the review process and final review approval by Federal Highway and FTA in January of 2026. So that is 1 year off, I see. And that is really kind of where we are. You do have in your packet a listing of all the projects, so this is an opportunity to take a look at those last time to make sure that I haven't lost something in translation. The individually, right now in this format, you'll see those individually listed bike and pedestrian and ITS, CMAC Tech projects are individually listed, just for clarity. Those will be rolled into a grouping when we get to the final document. That'll provide us some extra flexibility actually for those projects as well. When we're doing modifications, we won't have to do any amendments to those projects just because of the flexibility that's built into groupings. And I will pause if there are any questions. Our intention then is to have that draft later this month. When we have that, once that goes to TDOT, we'll certainly share that out available for everybody to take a look at as well. This is not an action item. So.
All right, thank you, Craig. That's not an action item. We'll move on to item number 4, the TPO travel demand model update, scoping overview. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to kick this item off, but turn it over shortly to our consultant, Vince Bernard with Caliper Corporation, to take us through the bulk of the presentation. But quick agenda for this item here. We have an introduction and then a review of our stakeholder survey that we sent out, and then an overview of a workshop we're having later today to take a deeper dive into this scoping and visioning of the next update of the travel demand model. So Doug mentioned it as part of the work program is in there to update our regional travel demand forecasting model. We currently maintain a 10-county regional model that's shown all those counties there on the map. It includes both the Knoxville TPO area shown in orange as well as the Lakeway MPO in the purple shaded area. So it's quite a large area to maintain data for and all that. So our model was updated and validated to a 2022 base year that you heard me talk about as part of the mobility plan development. But overall, the platform was really developed back in 2009, 2010 from a survey that was conducted in 2008. So this is really reaching the end of its life. The expectation for a size of our MPO is to conduct a major household survey every 10 years or so. So we're past that 10-year window. And then with that, you update your travel demand model to capture all those changing travel behaviors, which we've talked about here. Obviously, from 2008 to now, there's a lot that's changed, especially coming out of COVID and all of the working from home and the other aspects of home deliveries of goods and so forth. So as part of our minor update for 2022, we contracted with Caliper Corporation. They're the company that makes the software that model runs in, known as Transcad. They did that model update, and we also had a task in there to help us vision and begin the very groundwork of the next major update. We knew we were ready for a major update, but there's a lot of aspects that need to be considered with that, and let alone the cost aspect of and data needs that fold into that. So today we have Vince Bernard with Caliper Corporation. I'll do this quick, brief introduction. He can elaborate on this. We've worked with Vince for several years, back to the original model in the early 2000s. He's been with a couple different firms in the meantime, but we've continued to work with him over the years. He's a nationally recognized expert in the area of travel demand modeling, attends lots of TRB conferences and presents all over the country and probably the world. So with that, I'll turn it over to Vince to take us through the rest of this. Thanks, Mike. Is that push the button over there? Yeah.
Is that on now? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mike. Glad to be with you guys. It's been an honor to work on your model for on and off for a long time, and exciting now that you guys, it's time to think about kind of a major reinvestment. As Mike said, kind of the this is something that MPOs your size are generally expected to do every decade or so, and it's been a little longer than that now, and so it's time. But so we reached out. We wanted to reach out to all of you to get some input, particularly kind of on your priorities for analysis needs, right? Because obviously this is your tool, and the key is, we want a tool that will serve your needs and answer the questions that you all have. So we sent out a survey. We got a dozen responses from many of you guys. Most of the respondents said they had not used the model themselves, but a third did have a technical background. In terms of the first kind of question, or one of the first questions was about the importance of different things in identifying and prioritizing transportation needs. And we got a very strong response, indicating the importance of technical analysis in that. In fact, all the respondents said that technical analysis was either very important or fairly important. Of course, all of those things are important, but again, it does kind of underscore the importance of kind of the hopefully objective technical analysis piece of it, which the data and modeling bring. Then there's a question about special studies that the model can also be used to support, and the importance of these different kinds of studies. Sub-area studies were indicated as kind of the most important, followed by transit studies and bike ped plans, and toll studies kind of were a little less of a priority or on the scope. There are other kinds of analyses that the model can be used for, and so we wanted to kind of gauge people's interest in these other potential applications of the model. By far, by a good margin, the number one response was traffic impacts, looking at traffic impacts of new development as a potentially important, valuable additional analysis. There are many MPOs around the country that do use their models for this. Some of them have very formal systems, through which they have development fees. Others do it much less formally, but many organizations use their models in that way. Looking at different land use scenarios was another, this was the second most important response in terms of ways that you might want to see the model used. This is something you guys have done a little bit of. In the past, I know you've done some, for instance, like high, medium, and low growth scenarios and so forth. But this is something that you may want to do more of. You may want to look at different kinds of land use scenarios and so forth as well. Kind of in the middle tier, accessibility and benefit cost analyses are two different kinds of technical analyses that some agencies use to help them in the prioritization of their projects. Accessibility analyses is something that has been growing in popularity in recent years. A lot of agencies around the country have been kind of embracing and picking this up as when it's done well, it can be both a rigorous, objective, but also kind of understandable analysis of, how transportation is really impacting people's ability to get to the places they need to get to, whether it's hospitals, groceries, their job, and so forth, right? Benefit cost analysis, is a little bit more economically oriented. The feds have traditionally liked it in their discretionary grant programs, so some agencies like to use it for that reason. So those were kind of mid-tier analyses that people indicated a fair bit of interest in. Not the top priority, but there was definitely some interest in. Some MPOs around the country use the model to look at different kind of like modal investment strategies, like what if we invested more in transit, or what if we invested more in bicycle pedestrian investments, or and so forth. that was kind of middle, but a little bit lower priority from the respondents to the survey. Looking at new technology and trends. Obviously, autonomous vehicles. There was lots of hype about a few years ago. It's kind of fallen off a little bit. Who knows when we really expect that, but certainly if and when it comes, it would be a real, game changer in a lot of ways. It would really change transportation. So, that's something to think about, but was clearly looked like a lower priority from the respondents right now. And equity analysis was also kind of a lower priority among the survey respondents. Then there was so those were kind of the questions really about directly about kind of what types of analyses you were interested in. This is a little bit more of a detailed, slightly maybe more technical question, but still we wanted to get people's input. In terms of, specific features that are explicitly represented in the model, intersection turn lane configurations is something that's not currently in the model, but that was the top response from the survey respondents in terms of something that they think should be explicitly represented. Multi-use paths and sidewalks were number 2 and 3. So there was definitely interest in kind of non-motorized modes, active modes there. Those are not currently explicitly in the model. Roundabouts was a little behind that. Representation of like home deliveries from like Amazon and Walmart Spark and stuff were kind of in the middle of the responses. Park and ride carpooling, bike lanes, food delivery, Uber Eats and DoorDash and that kind of stuff were a little bit lower, and kind of ride hailing, the actual Uber and Lyft, and then autonomous vehicles were kind of the lower priorities in terms of things that folks felt should explicitly be represented in the model. There were some other more general questions. The respondents rated the need for incorporating the latest science and technology like AI in the model very highly. And they reported the need to report benefit and impacts by detailed demographics kind of as moderately important. All the model users agreed that a short model runtime of like 4 hours or less was a goal. That was kind of the overview of the survey responses. I think the takeaways were that everybody agreed the importance of technical analysis, and most respondents said they responded to a question indicating that they thought that further investment in technical analysis could benefit planning for the region. There were a number of important additional analyses that were identified, I think. The sub-area plans, traffic impacts, land use scenarios, intersection operations, and bicycle pedestrian planning. I think on the whole, those things, I'm not sure if that's necessarily exactly the right order, but those were the things that the respondents seemed to rate more highly. And the model users in particular wanted short run times and more spatial resolution in the model. So that was the gist of the responses to the survey. I don't know your meeting rules. Is it appropriate to take questions on this here? Yeah.
How do you speed up the rendering time?
The model runtime depends on a variety of factors. And obviously, there's a tension between those last two things, right? The model runtime and the spatial resolution, right? So there is a trade-off between how detailed you can get down. If you want to get down to, like bikes and pedestrians, which is a very small scale kind of thing, that does require some additional computational time, right? One of the things, I guess, not to get into too much technical detail, but that we'll be getting into in the workshop later, for those who are interested in more, is there are different kind of model design, model architectures, and the current model is considered a hybrid model. There are more complex model architectures, generally called activity-based models, and they can provide some answers that hybrid and then simpler models can't, but they do come at a significant cost in terms of runtime and computation. Those tend to take like a full day or even longer to run. So, it seems like, and we'll be talking about this in the workshop more, but it seems like probably you guys don't want to go to an activity-based model, but that's one of the things that we are looking at and discussing in this context. Any other questions on the survey?
All right, Vince, thank you for that presentation.
Great, and then that was the review of the survey. We've got a few more things. So then this next is just kind of going over what we're going to be talking about in the workshop later this morning. Following this, going to go through a little bit of a crash course in the history of travel modeling in general, and specifically in the Knoxville region. Going to kind of examine, introduce kind of the spectrum of model designs, model architectures, what they offer, and some of the trade-offs there. We're going to look at the various model uses, including the core kind of required uses, the things you're currently using the model for, some of these things that you responded to in the survey that you were potentially interested in using the model for. Then we're going to examine key model design decisions, the data options and requirements for those, and looking at the costing of the various options. Really quickly, I don't want to belabor any of this for those who aren't too interested, but travel models actually began in the 1950s. It was one of the things that they built all this, computing power, partly coming out of like the Manhattan Project and so forth, right? And we're finding new uses for it. One of them was for urban planning. Some areas like Chicago and Detroit were two of the first ones to begin to try to use computers to try to forecast future transportation needs, especially to kind of design the urban interstates in their regions. That was kind of really part of the initial use. In the 1960s, it began using it. I think San Francisco was the first to use it for transit planning when they were planning the BART rail system in the Bay Area. In the 1970s, the federal government kind of took over and provided a standard mainframe software for the models, and they kind of developed this standard model that was called the four-step model. That four-step model, begins with trip generation, which is kind of answering like how many and what trips do people make. Trip distribution is kind of where do they go. Mode choice is, do they drive or do they walk? Do they take the bus? And then traffic assignment is kind of the routing over the network. What roads, what streets, highways do they use to get there? The current model, as Mike said, was developed in like 2009. It's a hybrid model, which it's kind of a blend of the older four-step models and the newer and some of the more complex activity-based models. It's significantly more accurate than the simpler four-step models. It does include transit and bike walk modes. It's sensitive to walkability and has more realistic representation of special populations like seniors, low-income folks, students, and so forth, tourists. This was the list of advantages. This is a slide that's just taken from 2009, I think. It unlike the simpler 1970s type models, it actually guarantees that all the travel is physically possible, which is always a good thing. We don't have people kind of disappearing here and appearing over there. There's sensitivity to gas prices, parking costs, tolls. Includes, as we said, all kind of modes of travel. There's sensitivity to urban design, kind of mixed uses, things like that, and density. More realistic representation of differences, in travel as people age. More accurate commuting patterns and so forth, shifts in the timing of travel, and more accurate truck modeling. Since 2009, as Mike said, there have been several minor updates to the hybrid model. The most significant was probably that 2012 one where the model area was expanded to incorporate the Lakeway MPO. The rest of those have been mostly focused on just updating the model's base year and forecast years, although this last one did include a little bit more of an update with regard. It kind of made some attempt to account for the change in respect to working from home that's occurred since COVID. This was a slide, I think, that was shared with you guys last year, kind of showing that this was our best estimate of the way that trip making in the Knoxville region has changed between like 2018 before COVID to 2022 after. And you can see that there's a significant decrease in trip making, which is almost all a decrease in work trips. So a 16% decrease in work trips and 7 to 8% decrease in overall trip making. This is the spectrum of model designs. I'll be explaining this in the workshop and so forth, but you can kind of, the pointer doesn't work, but that's okay. You can see kind of, even here, if just looking at the orange within the state, you've got a range of different kind of model designs and complexity. You guys are kind of in the middle / more advanced side of things, which I think is a good place to be. These are the key model design decisions that we're going to be going over. There's the question of the overall architecture, which is primarily kind of a question about whether you stay with the hybrid or whether you want to move to an ABM. There's the question of do you add more temporal and operational details like turning lane configurations and signal timings into the model or not. There's the question of spatial resolution, and that kind of, and tied to that also the bike walk mode and how much, in what level of detail you try to model that. There's also questions: do you incorporate, delivery trucks? The Amazon trucks and the UPS that are delivering Amazon and all that. There's a question of coverage. Do you continue to model, the Knoxville region and the Lakeway MPO together in the one large regional model? You kind of were pushed hard that way, almost had to because of air quality requirements in the past. Those have kind of, been relieved. There's a little bit of a risk they could come back, but, probably not a high risk. So there's a question of to what, do you maintain this really large 10-county model, or do you kind of zoom back in a little bit more on the Knoxville region? There's question, do you want to, or how much do you want to kind of incorporate AI in the new model? And then kind of post-processing tools after the model proper, things that are used for the emissions analysis, for the air quality conformity, and accessibility analysis tools potentially benefit cost analysis tools. So these are all things we'll be talking about in more detail in the workshop. I think the two biggest questions, though, probably that need to be answered are, do you incorporate operational details? Do you want to be, modeling, traffic operations in terms of signal timings and coordination and so forth, or not? It definitely requires more data, requires more effort to do that level of modeling, but there are benefits to it. You can get really nice animations that are helpful for public engagement, as well as kind of the technical, performance measures and so forth as well. Then the other question is, do you want to invest more in bicycle and pedestrian modeling? Do you want your model to actually be able to evaluate the benefits of things like multi-use paths? Or do you just want to generally understand the walkability of areas and, how that impacts trip making there and so forth? Those are kind of the big, questions that we're looking at and trying to get your input and thoughts on. This is kind of a little bit of a attempt to look at kind of how these different decisions impact the different model uses. You can see kind of some things like the technology kind of tend to benefit, the AI really is improving accuracy. That benefits almost everything. Other things are more focused, microzones or whatever are really important and beneficial for that bicycle pedestrian modeling, but aren't super impactful for a lot of other things, things like that. So we're going to be going over this all in detail. And then I think, Mike, were you going to
I'll close this last summary slide here. Obviously, there's a lot involved in this, and we're just barely scratching the surface. But I wanted to give you kind of a taste of what's involved, and then folks that are wanting to get more information and take a deeper dive, like Vince mentioned, we have a workshop that starts at 10:30 and lasts till noon. But what the next steps are with this scoping process, there will be a final report produced by Vince that will summarize all the findings and kind of the pros and cons of these different approaches and give us a ballpark list of the costs associated with different aspects of it that we can weigh as we move forward. One of the big factors of this is the ongoing household travel survey that you've heard me talk about. We partnered with other MPOs in the state. It's called My Travels Count. This should be wrapped up by the end of this calendar year. And that's really the core of the data that feeds into the model and develops those travel behavior relationships that the model uses. So we're trying to collect as many samples as we can with a target of 3,000 in that whole 10-county area. And this started in late spring, after spring break. We got 1,000 of that 3,000 so far, which is below what we were hoping for in the spring. We wanted to have over half, if possible, so we're going to resume that in the fall. We may be doing more outreach campaigns to try to make sure we get that target. And then after that, we'll have a full model request for a proposal, RFP, after that survey and going into the next work program period. So with that, we'll have more refined scoping, and there will be other opportunities to engage with you guys as we develop that final scope and budget to make sure we cover the aspects you guys are most interested in. So this is the very beginning of the process here. And that's our last slide. If any other feedback you guys have for today, I know it's a lot to take in at once here, and you can always reach out to me after this as well.
I've got a quick question about truck traffic. So the demand model, can we actually differentiate? I know you've got delivery truck modeling. Since we're at the intersection of 40 and 75, and we have so much manufacturing around here, it makes sense for origin destination for freight. So I'm just curious, is that something that can be modeled? Because that seems more important than bike ped to me whenever we're dealing, because there's alternatives where if we could differentiate truck routes or things of that nature on these local scales, it would make sense for us to use that as a tool.
Yeah, there were improvements to the truck model, from the prior models to the current one back in 2009. Since then, there have been some updates that have incorporated, obviously one of the big game changers in the past 10, 15 years has been big data, right? And there is particularly good big data for heavy trucks. It's more difficult with the light and medium commercial vehicles, although there is increasingly some good big data on those even as well. And so definitely the new model, we're recommending, should incorporate and make use of those new data sets. I think the real question is, the current model is current truck model is trip based. So you're just modeling those kind of origin to destination truck trips, which is generally fine for stuff coming into and going out of the region. Which is what a lot of the heavy trucking is, right? But it doesn't do as good a job with the kinds of tours that the medium and lighter commercial vehicles do with deliveries, right? Where they go, it's not just like from the warehouse to the factory or whatnot, right? It's, they're going from the warehouse, and making a bunch of stops to deliver, right? And so that, if you really want to capture that and reflect those patterns and how they might respond to things, it requires a little bit more in-depth modeling. So that's the question about, do you want to do that delivery truck modeling or not? But even if you don't do that, the truck model should improve just from the benefit of new and better big data that we have on trucks. Yeah.
Catherine's over there.
And bear with me, trying to, this is a lot to absorb at once. So one of our biggest problems, it seems, is the large truck that are driving through the area. And that seems to be the major delays on our interstates, flight delays, even at night. It's amazing the number of large trucks on the road. Maybe they just choose to drive at night, but it is really starting to affect their ability to move localized traffic because they are using the same facilities. So would the study identify or separate between, and it sounds like that's what you were talking about, just with Jack's question, which ones are going truly through our system, and that's the only utilization of our facilities, because I think that's a big decision that needs to be made on our interstate system, is how do we get these people or the large trucks in and out as fast as possible so the rest of us can use those roads.
Mm-hmm.
We've faced decisions about adding lanes, circumferential routes, making improvements just to address large trucks. So it seems to be the biggest thing that is a deterrent to efficient utilization of their existing system and knowing where that money needs to go to get them in and out.
I'll jump in real quick on that just to say that TDOT is using our current model as part of their big I-40/75 West Knox corridor study. They presented on a few months ago, and we should be getting another update in the near future. But using our model along with the big data sources that Vince talked about to try to get a handle on that through travel versus local travel and see, would a bypass divert enough of that traffic to relieve congestion? All those types of analyses are going on right now with our, no, That's using current big data and then our current model platform as well in conjunction, because each of these are just one tool and you kind of got to look at everything together, so.
I think, the interstate system's great, and I think TDOT, I appreciate them looking at that. I'm talking like 321's an example. Truck traffic coming from Maryville is instead of getting on the interstate in Maryville and circling around Knoxville, they're bypassing Knoxville and coming straight through Lenore City. So that would be, one of the ones a corridor I'm kind of thinking about from a freight standpoint.
We see it, coming through Oak Ridge to avoid the interstates, and city streets are becoming bypasses to the interstates.
We can drill down on a lot of that, even with just the big data we have, showing a lot of that information. And then, of course, if it's something specific, like if you have an issue, that's something we can come out and do class counts and get much, more detailed information with as well. Because we can tell the difference between the big trucks and the little ones, but the heavy freight's, yeah, it's just gonna keep getting worse.
I think it becomes a tool to educate our leaders and decision makers on options like truck routes, trying to keep these trucks out of the downtown areas. I mean, I think that if we had some tool that we can utilize to tell that story, that's what I would like to see come out of the model.
That is something that you can do with the model. The model can represent, truck prohibitions and so forth, and help provide some insights on that. So, yeah, no, I don't know that that's something you guys have done, but I know you were talking about doing a freight plan, some freight studies. You might think about using the model in that way to support that.
One thing that we have to keep in mind, and Jack, you probably know this, but if it's a state route, we can't limit freight. We only limit freight on one state route in the state of Tennessee that I'm aware of. And
well, the problem becomes during detours, right? So, that's another issue. And again, that's, the model's really not taking into consideration for detours and things such as wrecks on the interstate or things like that that divert the traffic into our local communities. Yeah. And all of a sudden, none of the signals are, guys, everybody around this table knows how it works. I mean, it's just a challenge for all of us. So any tools we can get in the toolbox is helpful. So I
blame Google Maps for
right. Exactly.
This is a survey, so how do you survey the big trucks?
Right. So there's the household survey that's going on, and that is used to support the development of the model of the resident, personal travel in the model. The truck modeling is developed from primarily from truck big data, from like the American Transportation Research Institute and other providers like Geotab and so forth, and then also the counts. Right. Everybody gets excited about big data, but good old like classification counts are and traffic counts more generally, are actually very important, right? And they allow us to actually expand the big data properly. So the truck data is generally based on those two things, not the surveys. I apologize. There's a lot of detail, but.
So Troy, is TDOT keeping track of the number of trucks, where they're going, the through travel?
Yeah, we've got a lot of that, and then again, it's with the big data, and then we verify the big data with our counts to see if they're right, and most of the stuff we looked at is pretty close. The traffic counts are pretty good. But it even comes down to like OD or turning movements. I mean, there's some really good tools out there we can do now, and then these guys can take that and really refine that, give us a much better idea, and then we can play the what-if game with the model. What if the road shuts down? What do I do here? Or what if we add another lane? Is that going to help? One of the big differences between that and the American Household Survey is when we get up in the morning and we go drop our kid off at school and pick up a cup of coffee, the survey will count every stop versus the big data is going to say, okay, well, you just go over here and stop. Well, trip number 2 is going to be here, and trip number 3 is going to be here. So we had 3 trips all at the same time versus the one real trip, we just hit everything in between. And that's where that really gets down into the granular and helps us saying, well, okay, well, you didn't have 3 trips that day. You had 1 trip this morning. You just hit 3 things on the way to work. the big data with the trucks, because those are typically OD, point A, point B. It's not the LTL or the delivery type truck.
Right.
Those are a lot easier to work with the model.
I think it's extremely timely that we do this, because just as Roger said, the main road from I-40 through Oak Ridge, through Clinton, has almost rendered that road at certain times of the day. It passes 3 schools, 4 schools, and these giant trucks we got kids going from, the high school to band practice, and they have to cross this road. And we're right at that juncture where it seems we're making decisions, and especially TDOT is making decisions about adding lanes, moving large facilities. I hope we're still considering a bypass around the northern tier of Anderson County and Knox County and Roane County. And these are the things that take the most money out of the allocation that we have. And I personally think we're not looking far enough in the future on some of these issues and trying to really get the through traffic dealt with so the rest of us can use those roads in a safe and efficient manner. So, I appreciate that we're doing this at this time, and hopefully it can inform those major decisions about those major infrastructure improvements.
Yeah.
Because I don't see toll lanes as being the answer.
The regional model absolutely is designed to help do exactly that kind of thing, right? To really look out 20, 30 years and understand, what would a major bypass do, right? The current model, I think, it is being used to do that. It should be able to do a good job with that. The new model should also maybe even slightly better job with that. I think that's exactly part of the value that these kinds of analytic tools bring. One of the questions though that was brought up kind of about the like detours, maintenance of traffic and so forth. That's something that like the current model and the current type of model can do a little bit of, but that the question about do you invest in kind of more detailed operational modeling, that's another kind of use of operational modeling. Like in the Detroit area, they do that kind of more detailed operational modeling, and a lot of it actually has been because of in order to do maintenance of traffic planning for kind of some major rebuilds of some of their interstate system and things like that. So that's I did want to respond to your comment on that there. Yeah, but yeah.
One other thing I'm going to add in on that, then I'll be done. I promise, Mike. If we're looking at a specific corridor that we're doing these detours, we've got the planning grants that we can use, and then there's studies that we can do here to set up your TSMO. If you're dealing with a lot of signals, and how we can, if we have an emergency situation where we have to detour, do we need to change those lights or what needs to happen? We've got some very talented folks that can help with that as well. Just something we need to talk about and look at. And I think we're looking at our detour we're looking at that entire process right now anyway. So it's like what routes we're using, which ones we're on, and what's working.
It would be nice if we had some funds to update some of those ITS systems to incorporate some of those detours.
Right.
From some of the regional areas, I think. Hint, hint.
All right, great discussion on that item. 10:30 workshop, right, Mike? Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure you can follow up there. Item number 6 on the agenda, TDOT and FHWA updates, statewide partnership program.
Included in your packet is information about the statewide programs, the last page on there. there's a lot of questions on there. There's a lot of what ifs, what do we do? So the SPP program, or State Partnership Program, we've been successful in the Knoxville area on getting a couple projects. I think Pellissippi right away was an example of one, and that was a really good project to work through. But the thing about the SPP is it's helping us, or helping TDOT make the decisions on what the main priorities are and moving forward. It's not replacing what the priority of the MPO is specifically. A couple of things that I will highly encourage you to do is there is a deadline, August 29th. Get it in before then. There are a few things in there that you may have to talk to your city or county governments about specifically to get the endorsement. If you are, you really need to work with the TPO on this, specifically, especially if you're gonna ask for any kind of funding from them for assistance. It really need, you need to talk to Craig. It may not be there. And if I'd hate for anyone to come through and make a promise of $10 million or $20 million and it's just not available or the board denies it. So definitely work very closely with them. Of course, it's got to be something, if it's something that was just pulled out of the tip, one of those projects, those are beautiful key ones to go after if that's something that we think we can get moving in a timely manner. Because in addition to the funding is the delivery, how deliverable is it and what are the risks? And when I say risk, we're talking about the risk of the cost going up or something being delayed. And that we're doing everything we can to mitigate risk to keep these projects moving. So great website on it, lots of other information. You have an excellent TPO staff here that can help. TDOT can also assist. Chances are we're going to roll it back over and talk to Mike and your all's team anyway with Doug and to assist with that. You all have the application, the blank application that you can look at to see what the specific questions are. And we can move through that. Any questions on that? I think this is the third or fourth year we've done this.
Yeah, we forwarded out that information last week. If you didn't get it, please let me know. But we really, again, just to stress that, we highly encourage you guys to let us know what you're planning to submit on. And actually, what we'd like to do is go ahead and reach out to you guys first and talk to you about all the possible projects for this and go over those with you and help you in any way to put the application together. So stay tuned for that. We'll be in touch.
With the RPOs, Laura, it's going to be the same thing. They have questions on it. They'll be working with you on those. Same thing with Lakeway. Planning grants, we do have planning grants. We have those will be coming out in the next probably 2 or 3 months. Watch for that announcement. I'll make sure y'all are very aware of that. And those are the grants that TDOT pays for 80 to 90% of it and goes through, and it can be a TSMO, like what we were talking about, Jack. It could be a corridor study specific. A lot of the things that the TPO already does for you, but we can also look at those for the specific cities or counties, or we've done infrastructure, pavement plans for the counties. Those have been very, very popular, doing inventories for them. So there's a lot of different things. Again, on our website, we have a lot of that information you can look at. Last thing I was going to announce was, if you are not aware, Steve Borden has announced his retirement. His last day is actually Friday. Steve's been with the department for 34 years. And of course, he was with the department with his dad forever before that. So he grew up with TDOT his entire life. So I do not know who we are looking at right now as far as an interim. We have great leadership at the region. And between Dexter, Christy, and Amanda, I'm sure we'll keep things rolling. But as of right now, I don't know anything about an interim or a permanent replacement on that point. Once that is announced, I'll make sure everybody's aware. And we also have, not related, but our commissioner is also stepping down, or he has stepped down, I think as of tomorrow. And Will Reed is taking the reins there. Will is our current, he's chief deputy on the engineering side. And he was in the other day, got to talk to him. But we're looking forward to working with Will, and I'm sure he'll have something to do with the replacement over here as well. Joe Gabato is also hanging it up, and we have a new CFO later this year, but they're working closely with them. So lots of movement, lots of stuff going around, but we'll keep y'all informed as those become available.
What's the date of the planning grant?
It's not been announced yet. I just know it's probably going to be August-ish, something like that. September is when we should start seeing those roll out. And there's going to be a pretty good application period for that, because our plan is to start that in late summer and then I believe award them by December, get it, folks under contract, start them in January, is kind of the tentative what we're looking at. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you, Troy. Number 7, other business. We've got the executive board meeting coming up July the 23rd. And our next TPO technical committee meeting is September 9th, 2025, 9 a.m.
And just real quick, you will notice that we don't have August in there. And as I mentioned, during the August Tech Committee, there's a statewide MPO conference, so we'll all be there. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that the work program will be passed by the executive board and we don't have to have an August meeting. And then I just did want to recognize Mayor Williams back there. I think he's come down for the workshop, but it's always good to have one of our mayors attend the technical committee. And we also have another dignitary, Elena Conger. I want to point her out, Mike's eldest daughter. She's a intern at the city of Oak Ridge, so we really appreciate you visiting today. She attends the University of South Carolina, and it's been a while since I heard, but environmental engineering, is that civil engineering? So welcome to the meeting. So other than that, that's all I had.
Oh, it's Craig's birthday today. So.
Oh, is it? Yep, happy birthday, Craig.
Happy birthday. All right. We got any public comment? Anyone in the audience like to address the board? Seeing none. I guess anybody online? No? Okay. All right. I have a motion to adjourn. All right. We're adjourned.